Good evening. Welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome Salma El-Wardany and Leesa Cross-Smith to discuss their new novels with writer Nichole Perkins this evening. Just a quick webinar overview for our attendees as you're joining us. The chat is closed, but we encourage you to keep the chat window open on your Zoom so we can share links to purchase books from tonight's authors from Literati throughout the event. And the Q&A feature is available to you as well. Whenever you feel moved to do so, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A, and Nichole will ask a selection of those questions on your behalf at the conclusion of tonight's conversation. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, there are always links to purchase books in the description directly below me, where you can also subscribe to our channel and be kept up to date with all of our At Home with Literati events once they become available on YouTube. And just a special thank you this evening to our friends at Grand Central and their Sizzling Summer Reads program for choosing Literati to be the home of this conversation tonight. We're grateful to the publishers that make the work that we do as booksellers incredibly fun. So without further ado, and introduce tonight's authors and our moderator. Salma El-Wardany is a writer, poet, and BBC broadcaster. As a half Egyptian, half Irish woman, her work focuses on telling stories of women, especially women of color, that have for so long been ignored. She has contributed to the anthology It's Not About the Burqa, and her writing has also appeared in Huffington Post, The Metro, and she has given 2 TEDx talks. Leesa Cross-Smith is a homemaker and the author of Every Kiss, a War, Whiskey and Ribbons, So We Can Glow, and This Close to Okay. She lives in Kentucky with her husband and their 2 teenagers. And speaking with them this evening, Nichole Perkins is a writer from Nashville, Tennessee. She examines the intersections of pop culture, race, sex, gender, and relationships. She's a 2017 Audre Lorde Fellow at the inaugural Jack Jones Literary Arts Retreat and a 2017 BuzzFeed Emerging Writers Fellow. She hosts This Is Good For You, a podcast that highlights the pleasures of life. Her first collection of poetry, Lilith But Dark, was published in 2018, and her memoiristic collection of essays, Sometimes I Trip on How Happy We Could Be, was published by Grand Central last year. Please join me in welcoming Leesa Cross-Smith, Salma El-Wardany, and Nichole Perkins into your living rooms.
Nichole, I think you're on mute.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is going to be a really good night. So to get us started, I would like if you could both, we're not going to do readings tonight, but if you could both give us the elevator pitches of your books, a summary of what your books are about. And I'll start with you, Salma.
Sure, yes. Hi, and hello to everyone who's joining us. It's so lovely to be here with you all. What I was saying before we started, when I shouldn't have been talking, was the music sounds like real elevator music, and now we're giving an elevator pitch. I love it. I'm loving the synergies that are happening here. Yes, so really briefly, what my book is about is 3 women, Malek, Keith, and Jenna. And they've been best friends since they were young. And then one night something happens that sets them all adrift from one another. And they all go off on 3 very different journeys. And the book is very much an ode to female friendship. And it explores female friendship. And it questions what happens when the women who have been by your side your whole life, what happens when they suddenly disappear? And what kind of choices do you make? And what kind of woman do you become when those women are no longer in your life? So that's what it's about. And they're 3 Muslim women, all from 3 very different cultures and backgrounds, all just trying to figure out love, life, sex, ambition, and then suddenly they have to do it by themselves.
All right, Leesa.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for everything, y'all. Yeah, my book is called Half Blown Rose, and it's about a woman called Vincent who escapes to Paris after her husband's betrayal. He's written a best-selling book divulging secrets, things he hasn't bothered to tell her over the course of their 25 yearish relationship. And so she runs off to Paris, and while she's there, she lives in her parents' apartment because she comes from a really wealthy family and they're not there. And she starts teaching art at the local art museum. And then there is a young man there who's about 20 years younger than she is. She's 44, he's 24, and he wears really short shorts and he thinks she's pretty. And it kind of spirals out from there as she decides whether she wants to give her husband Killian the time of day again, if she wants to stay with him, or if she wants to live her life a little bit differently now because she's in a very different place. So it's a love letter to Paris. It's a love letter to the female gaze and to desire, and to a woman in her 40s, and to art. And yeah, she's named Vincent after Vincent van Gogh.
Lovely. Thank you both. So you both have these books that are love letters to women's friendships, love letters to women, over a certain age, finding themselves. What is it? Do you feel like you were missing something in the media that you were consuming that kind of directed you to write these love letters as they were?
I think we were missing everything.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I agree with Selma. I guess I'll say, I want to be very careful when I talk about this because there are always going to be books that I've never heard of or never read. So I'm certainly not going to say, oh, I've been the one to do this. But yes, I did want to read a book about a privileged Black woman. So my character, Vincent, doesn't really have to work. She does make jewelry because she wants to, but she just has money. She's really privileged because her dad is a musician and a songwriter and just made a ton of money in the 70s and 80s and loves to spoil his children. So so I'm not at all saying there aren't books about privileged Black women. I just wanted to write one too. And then, I wanted to write a book about a woman in her 40s who it's almost, not even almost, it's a coming of age story, but she's in her 40s. So she has children in their 20s. She has a son who's actually the same age as Lou, the young man she starts spending time with in Paris. So again, there are lots of books about, older women and younger men, but when you put the pieces of the puzzle in the way I wanted to, making her a Black woman, making her in Paris, putting her here and there and putting those pieces together, it was something that I wanted to see. So the short answer is yes, but then I feel like it's a little more complicated than that once you start talking about it.
Yeah, I think it is definitely complicated. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I found, and maybe this, because it's a bit like what Lisa said, you can't read everything. You read a section or a subsection of the canon or culture, so you can't cross everything. But I know that growing up for me, and being in the UK and growing up in the UK, it was very much the things that I read growing up was the canon of English literature, right? Or what the academics would consider. So Austen, Shakespeare, Dickens, Bronte's, it was all of that. And that's a very specific experience that they're talking about. And if you're a young brown Muslim woman, there's not much for you. And literature has for so long been dominated by male voices. So, Lisa's book about through the female gaze and through female desire, that's not something that we have reams and reams of literature on and from female writers, right? If desire comes into it, it's from male writers, which
right.
They can write about them, but I sorely found that there was such a space for female stories, and I write female stories because I'm so obsessed with the lives of women, because the lives of women have been portrayed in literature in a very specific way, which is not the full complexity of their existences. So for me, 100%, I searched for myself in literature and couldn't find it anywhere. And I read like 9 books a week growing up for years and years and years. Like I outread my library, right? And I couldn't find myself anywhere. So for me, this book was very intentional. This was always going to be what the first book was about, because I very intentionally wanted to put our experiences on paper.
Mm-hmm. And obviously identity and culture are very important to both of you. How do you go about writing about identity and culture without it becoming a lesson and without it seeming like I'm teaching this to people who are unfamiliar while still honoring the people who are familiar with
Mhm.
these various identities and cultures in your books. Leesa, if you would like to start.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because so my first novel, Whiskey and Ribbons, came out in 2018. And I remember someone who had blurbed it said that I was really, I can't remember exactly how she said it, but it was something about how I was really defiant in all I wouldn't say. And really what she was saying was that it's a book with Black characters, but it's not about being Black. It was just about these characters living their lives. It's about a woman who was pregnant and her husband is a police officer and he's killed in the line of duty. Like that's what the book is about. They are Black, but it wasn't what the book was about. And so a lot of it is so really in a way I am purposely like defiant about not saying, oh, Half Blown Rose is about a Black woman and her marriage, or a Black woman in Paris. She is a Black woman in Paris, but I'm reluctant to say that's what the book is about, because if you want to read this and go on the journey, then just jump in and let's go without, it's like those memes that are like, no time to explain, just hop in and let's go. Like it kind of feels like that, like let's just go along the way. So it is important to me that my characters are who they are. I never shy away from that, but the way, and a lot of this has to do with the business of selling the writing, right? They want to know who is in this book, who is this book for, but so often we're just sold other books, especially books by white writers, that this is just like a universal experience. It's a book about marriage. It's a book about friendship. It's a book about what, and we're called to put like these labels on it. I just really refuse to put those labels on it. I'm going to jump right in. If you want to, if you do want to come along without shying away from who she is and who the characters really are. Like, I really do think the readers can handle it. I think people are ready for that, to just be able to read without being spoon-fed, oh, this is how you should feel about it. And so it's really important for me to be able to write women fully, really, and the Black women fully, and Black women who are messy, Black women who are kind, Black women who are nasty, like this whole range of the human experience that white men have been able to write about forever, right? It's like, and we talk about it so much, and it feels wild to be talking about in 2022. It feels wild to still have to be talking about it, but that's what we got to do sometime, and that's what I'm trying to do with my work, for sure.
Salma?
Yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying there about it just being a story that's about
Right.
these universal experiences, and not having to constantly, be put into like under a diverse section in the
Right.
bookshop or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I that really hits home for me, because I really wanted to write a novel that was about Muslim women, but the fact that they were Muslim wasn't the main event.
Right.
And it wasn't the main story. You can have, because popular culture and our society has told a very specific narrative about Muslim women,
Mhm.
and the media has told a very specific narrative about what Muslim women are and who they are. And we never get to be messy and in love and passionate and wild and sexual. We can't be all of those things because we're being, whatever stereotype that the media has said we are.
Mhm.
And that's so damaging, and feeding people that single story is so damaging to Muslim women who are living very real and complex and different realities. And so for me, I wanted this to be a book. They just so happen to be Muslim. It's not the main event. And I think the way, in terms of how I do that, I think it's about decentering the white gaze.
Mhm.
So we don't have to over explain it, because like Lisa said, the readers can handle it and they're ready for it. And there's a thing called Google. And if there's something that you don't understand, you can just Google it, right?
Yep.
Like Leo Tolstoy wrote War and Peace, and half of that shit is in French and the other half is in Russian. And I had to Google so much when reading War and Peace when I was a kid. And I learned so much about Russian farming, by the way. And that was everyone within the academic literary establishment all accept that you're going to read War and Peace and you're going to have to research loads of
Mhm.
Russian words as you go along. No one questions it. And I remember reading and thinking, well, I don't have to then explain if I put an Arabic word in, or if I put something about the Muslim faith or traditions. I don't have to explain that, because everyone can figure it out. So I think for me, it's about decentering. So you're not over explaining it, and you're just putting it on the page, very similar to what Lisa said. You're putting it on the page. Our readers are smart. Our readers are intelligent. Our readers are very capable of handling things that are not their direct experience, and still relating and drawing their own experiences from it.
Excellent. I agree. I'm fully on board. I'm also one of those people who it's totally fine when you do not italicize non-English words. Like you don't have to. Like it's okay if it just flows. You don't have to announce this is something strange because maybe it's not strange to your reader. You never know who's reading, so maybe it's not a strange thing. Salma, you talked about wanting to write about these Muslim women just because who happen to be Muslim, but did you set out to have any particular idea of how you wanted to write about their religion, or did your characters kind of lead you into addressing their faith as they grew on the page?
No, I did. I set out with a very specific intention, actually. And I had a very specific idea of how they were going to relate to their faith. And it was really important to me from the get-go that these were going to be Muslim women who were sexual and passionate and had big desires and fulfilled those desires and never felt shame about those desires, because so much of the narrative around faith, and I think this is true for all faiths, right? This is not something that's specific to Islam. But when we talk about women of faith having desires, shame is the next sentence. Right. It always is the next sentence. And that pisses me off. And I just think, nope, I hate that. I hate this idea or this. And I appreciate, I push on the boundaries a lot. But I hate the idea that when we talk about faith, all the faiths, there is always this fire and brimstone narrative that we bring to it. There is this dichotomy of saint or sinner, and no one really talks about the in-between bits and the gray bits and how we navigate modernity and faith bits. Like no one mentions those. So I was very intentional. These were going to be women who loved their faith, were not having existential crises about their faith, were not pouring into shame holes every time they got laid, but who had really close personal relationships with God. Because I find that for me, that's what faith is. It's about a personal relationship with a higher being, whatever higher being that is for you. And then all the mechanics of religion, they really can get in the way, and they can really they can be used as an instrument of patriarchy. They can really be bastardized into something else. So for me, these were going to be three women who have personal relationships with God, and they don't feel shame about it at any point.
Excellent. Beautiful. So you both write about love and sex in very different ways, but they act as catalysts in various ways as well in each book. So how do you approach writing about sex and the romantic relationships that are, a part of these characters' lives? Leesa?
Yeah, and to what Selma was saying about faith, all my characters always, I'm a Christian, and my characters are although not all my characters are Christian, but I definitely, so in Half Blown Rose, Vincent crosses herself when she hears a siren, or, when she's praying for someone, when she sees an ambulance, and like, it's never been hard for me to have a woman who has faith and also is like horny for the guy in her class. Like, those things just exist normally in my brain, and like everyone, like it just isn't totally normal for me. So that part of writing about sex is just easy for me, because I'm just saying, to me, I'm giving Vincent regular thoughts. Someone else may call them something else, but to me, she's just thinking normally. And she's in a very specific position because she's estranged from her husband. They got together when she was around 19. She's now 44, and she's in Paris, and she really is having these feelings without guilt. She has decided she's not going to feel bad for them, although she did resist this young man at first. She went there in the summer, and it's now October when the book starts, and now he's come back to her apartment. Now she's being more like, okay, sure, you can stay. She kind of opened the door, and then he kicked it down. But whenever I'm writing characters and whenever they're talking about sex and desire, I am just, again, trying to give them the full range of human emotion. So for me, I can't even imagine writing about a woman at that age around a young, attractive man without bringing desire into it. I would not know how to write that. And people so often, like sometimes when you go to Goodreads, which I try not to, sometimes when you go there, someone will be like, oh, is this, does this have like is this closed door? Is this open door? And it's like, I don't really even think about books like that. Like, is it serving what's going on? Like I could not have written Half Blown Rose without there being sex, because she's thinking about sex and she wants to have sex with him. Like it's such a normal thing, but for her to say that, she can just say that outright. She doesn't feel the need to not be honest with herself about it. And because there is so much interiority in my books and when I'm writing my characters, I would be dishonest if I weren't including those feelings. And I especially just get really excited to write women who are horny and confused, and it just feels normal. Feels like the women I know, feels like the same feelings that I feel. It just feels normal for me. So I don't know how not to do it. And it just feels that it just makes them more real to me. And plus it's just fun. I get so bored. If there's not sexual tension in a book, I mean, I will just be like, okay, I'm bored. Like I remember reading, there was like they started calling it like bangxiety. Like, if you're just like waiting, because I will truly just be so bored. I'll be like, when are they going to kiss? Like, please, because it's just a part of the reading experience for me. And those are the kind of books that I like to read. And that's what, so it's a personal thing for me. So on one hand, it's sort of shallow and just selfish, but then on the other hand, it just feels like I'm writing a real person when I do that.
I like that anxiety.
I saw that somewhere. I did not make it up, but it was so good. I remembered it.
I love that. And I love your answer. As soon as Nichole asked that question, I was like, tell me. I'd love to go around and talk to every writer about how they write desire and sex and love. It's really fascinating to hear it from another perspective. I currently don't have anxiety, but now I probably will. I think for me, when I'm writing, I am very aware, and maybe this is to my own detriment, and maybe I shouldn't. I'm very aware of gender politics at play when it comes to sex, when I'm writing about sex. And when I'm writing about men, I'm very aware of it then. And so in the sex scenes that I had in my book, in These Impossible Things, I made sure that the men were very pleasing and very giving, which is not true to reality, as we all know from lived experience. So maybe I'm writing fantasy. I don't know. But I was very, in my head, I was like, these men are going to be brilliant in bed, and not in the way that men think what it takes to be brilliant in bed, but they're going to just give these women orgasms, and they're going to be more giving, and they're going to give more than they take, and they're going to be very aware of the aftercare that is necessary after sex, and the duty of care a man should have after sex to the person that he's sleeping with, whether that's casually or not. So I probably write them a bit unrealistically, if I'm honest, because that is not the rule, but the exception, I think. But I'm just always really aware of it. I want to put on the page, like I want more women to read and to be able to read passages of sex in which men are attentive and giving as they should be. Because actually, what we've learned from our popular culture about sex, whatever you see in movies is, I don't know, he like tickles her cheek and then she's over the edge, which is just not true to life. And so I'm very aware of writing a different kind of sex scenes personally. That's for me. There's a political agenda.
I love an agenda.
I love it. I love that answer so much. Thank you for that.
And Leesa, in Half Blown Rose, you incorporate a lot of text. We've got manuscripts and text chains, diaries, playlists that are, exchanged, emails, etc. Did you have that already in mind, that there would be so much, that the media would be so significant, or did that kind of happen organically as you as the story was coming to you?
Yeah, it really, I had it in mind because Okay, since her husband Killian has written a book, the book is also called Half Blown Rose. And so I knew I needed to include snippets of Half Blown Rose inside of my own Half Blown Rose so that the reader could know what had pissed Vincent off so much, what made her so mad, right? So that was like a given that I was going to include excerpts of his book actually in my book. And then I really wanted the book to be as immersive as possible. So I included the soundtracks because I love the idea of a reader reading it, stopping to go make dinner and listening to the soundtrack if she wanted, or listening to the music while she was reading, or, just being able to go back and feel and try to put themselves in Vincent's shoes and feel how she was feeling during a certain moment of the book. So there are playlists for when she's traveling. There's a playlist that she and Lou send back and forth to each other, and it's called Less Than Conversation, because before they can actually say how they're feeling, they send songs back and forth to each other, just really in a high school way, sort of, even though I'm sure adults do it, but just in a way, this song reminds me of you. I can't say it, but I'm going to send it to you. So just listen to the song and you know how I feel. I did that so it would be really immersive. And then I included little bits of screenplays in there because I was really thinking that Vincent, what she's doing and staying in Paris for a year away from everything she's ever known is really, it's not real. It sometimes doesn't feel real to her. I wanted the reader to get the same feeling that we all do when we're traveling to a new spot and you're like, I love this place. And it feels sort of surreal when you wake up in the morning in the hotel and you're like, oh, I'm here. I'm in a different place now. I'm not at home. I wanted to get that feeling across a lot. And although the book isn't really metafiction, it is really aware of itself. It's really aware of itself as a work of art, as a book. It is never trying to trick the reader. Although it's immersive, it also is reminding the reader that this is a book. This is a story. This is a story that's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. So hold on, hang on a little bit for the ride. But I wanted to include those things also because I think they're fun when I encounter them in books. Like I love it when there's like suddenly like a newspaper entry in a book or something from a magazine or like a sudden picture or a soundtrack or something like that. So again, those were just kind of selfish things because I thought they'd be fun.
Love it. So we've talked about a little bit about like the characters and who they were, what you had in mind when you were writing them, the agendas behind them. But who, for both of you, and Salma, I'll start with you, who was the ideal reader that you had in mind once you got to a point where you could actually think about the reader? Because sometimes you can't allow yourself to think about who's going to be reading as you write. But once you got to a point where you thought about who is this book for, like who is the ideal person that you're like, please read this.
Yeah. Narcissistically so, I want to say everyone. I want to say everyone needs to read it because there's something for everyone, right? And I think it's definitely a book that is more geared towards women. And I can see why women are going to find that story more appealing. But then the narcissistic agenda side of me then thinks, well, men should read it because they need to understand women's lives. So they need to go and read it and then understand how things need to be done. But truthfully, it's for women. I think women of all ages. But for me, it was very much a book for women who are deeply invested in their female friendships, right? Somewhere along the way in our society, I feel like we've built this narrative that your female friendships are there until you find a man and get married and have kids. And then those things take over your life. And the female friendships get relegated a little bit, which I think is heartbreaking. But I think we're especially in a time of real conscientious friendships where women are saying, no, actually, these friendships are going to endure and they're going to last for years and years because they give me so much that even my partner and my kids might not be able to give me, and I need them to get through the partner and the kids and the parenting and all the stuff that comes with womanhood. So for me, it's really women who are really invested in those friendships. Like I want the feeling when you finish it, I want you to immediately pick up your phone and call your girlfriends and say, we need to go out for dinner or we need to meet. But that's kind of who it was for, I think.
Yeah. I love that. And take a copy of your book and give it to those girls too. Yeah. And tell them to buy their copy. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I'll get chills when you talk about female friendships. I just do because they are just so important. And it's a longer conversation, but like, no, I've never experienced like the feeling you get from like a breakup with a man has never had the same effect on me as the breakups with my girlfriends.
Right. 100%.
You know, like, yeah. So there is something there. And I feel like people do talk about that more now. I've seen more essays and articles about, you know, friendships breaking up. But yeah, anyway, love anything about girl friendships for sure. Yeah, so you know, like Selma, I would say everyone. I think everyone should read Half Blown Rose. But yeah, I definitely think women in their 40s. I think there's a lot for us out there, women in their 40s, but I wanted to specifically write this for women in their 40s because Vincent is 44 and living a really rich, full life. She does not want to be in her 20s. She doesn't want to be in her 30s. She loves being in her 40s. She really relishes the freedom that she has, the extra time she has. She's not worried about the things she was worried about before. And she is very confident, independent, and just really quite loves being in her 40s and meeting this young man who's in his 20s. Although she definitely has her moments where she's like, I'm a little old for you, whatever. But I also just feel like it's really great for a woman in her 40s to pick up a book where a woman loves being in her 40s. And it's not the typical, I'm thinking of like a Kathy comic or something, just being like, oh, Ack, I hate being yeah, I didn't want the book to be full of that. She really doesn't have very many Ack moments like that. She really is like very confident in herself, and she knows exactly why Lou is into her. She just is like, do I really want to bother with this right now? But his shorts keep getting shorter, and he's like, okay, I guess I do. I guess I will find time to bother with this right now. But and especially also, I am always writing books for Black women who want to read books just about life. Black people are fed a lot of books about Black trauma a lot of times. So Salma, when I was growing up, every time there was a Black girl on the cover of a book, she was a slave or it was Mississippi in 1963. And no, I really just wanted to read a book. So Babysitter's Club, there was a Black girl who was just a babysitter. And she was a ballerina.
I love Babysitter's Club.
Exactly. And she did a great job with diversity. Like now looking back, I'm just thinking about, so I really, I want Black women to be able to pick up a book that's not about American politics or how hard it is to be a Black woman in this part of the world or other parts of the world right now. I want a Black woman just to be able to pick up a book and read a book about romance and adventure in Paris. And also, Salma, to what you were saying about, a Black woman who's having really amazing sex with a young man who is very good at his job. That also I may be making that up too. I've been with the same man for 25 years. So I could be making that up. I don't know. But in my book, it happens. In my book, it's a real thing.
Yeah. We will just keep writing these scenes, Lisa, and then we will slowly change the fabric of our world. And hopefully all the women will be having better sex.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here for that. I want to talk now a little bit about the technical aspects of the craft of writing a book. And so I wonder, how did you write? Are you outliners? Are you more of a visual mood board person? Are you what they call the pantser, who's just like, okay, here's this idea, I'm just going to write raw from my brain to the typewriter. Whatever you use, you know what I mean. So how did you actually plan each of you? How did you plan your books? And is that the normal way that you do it, or did you try something different this time? Salma, you want to start, please?
Yeah, I did not plan this. I had this very vague idea of how it was going to start and how it was going to end. Had no idea what was going to happen in the middle or how they were going to get from A to B. And I would just be writing with this very loose outline. There's no mood board. There's no outline. There's no structure. I find I could spend 4 months doing that, in which I could have just been writing. For me, that's, and I remember when I was a kid, they always said, outline your essays and then write your essay. I always just thought that was a fucking waste of time. So I never did it. Maybe to my own detriment, I don't know, but I certainly didn't with this book at all. I'm very rigid with my word count. So I set myself very strict deadlines of what needs to be achieved by what time and how many words I'm going to write a day. And then I just went for it. But I wrote my second book in January, and I outlined that completely. And I knew what was going to happen from start to finish. I knew what was going to happen in each chapter. I wrote a brief synopsis of each chapter. So I've done kind of one each way now, and I'm sure Lisa can speak much better to this point about, I don't know which way. I'm hoping you're going to tell me which way is the better way, because I'm currently sitting in the middle of two, and I'm not sure which way is better at all. I have no idea.
Yeah, I kind of do a mix of all those things you said, Nichole. I mean, I outlined this. So I sold this book before I had finished it. So I had to actually outline everything that was going to happen. So for those of you who don't know how it works in the publishing industry, but I mean, I have to, in order to sell it, I have to tell the editor and my agent everything that's going to happen in it. So there's no like spoiler warning, like literally everything that's going to happen. You spoil the whole entire book. And so I actually had to write that out in order to sell the book. I maybe wouldn't have done it in that same way if I weren't doing that. But since I did, I just went ahead and used that to finish writing the book, of course. So I did outline. And so for my next book that comes out next summer, I've also did the same thing with the outline. But once I get inside of the chapters and inside the writing of it, I am kind of a pantser. It just depends. And so that makes it kind of exciting for me, because I do have these things. I know that this needs to happen at the beginning of the chapter, and I know this needs to happen by the end. But then in between, I can kind of like, that's where a lot of stuff, like I can come up with another character, or a character may get bigger or smaller depending. So I'll sort of do that. All of those. I do have a secret Pinterest board. So if I get someone in my brain who reminds me of someone, or if I need to remember what someone's hair looks like, or there are like several pictures of Timothée Chalamet's hair in that, so that I could be like, oh, when I was describing Lou's hair across, falling across his face or something like that, I will use things like that. That's kind of just for fun. I don't really need those things as much. But yeah, I hold to a really strict word count too. Like I need to get the book written. So I know that I'm sitting down and I need to write that much today. And when I am working on a book that I need to get finished, I am sometimes working 8 to 10 hours a day. Like I am there writing the book. I'm doing the work because I need to get the book finished. So I'm not flying on vibes and feelings like, oh, do I feel like writing?
Right.
It doesn't matter whether I feel like writing, I have to get the book done. And so I really do approach that side of it like a job. Sitting around doing the Pinterest board and doing the soundtrack, doing the playlist, like, oh, this would be so romantic. And wouldn't this be cool? That's one part of it. And then the other part is, oh, I'm just going to sit there till my back hurts because I have to finish the book. So.
Right. I really resonate with that. And I said this today to a friend who's also a writer. I said, we writers can waste so much time just trying to be creative or trying to wait for the flow to hit us. And I truly don't think it works like that. Like It's diligent and it's militant, and you sit down, you do the job, and you don't leave until it's done for the day. Right. If you manage to do that in 2 hours, then great, go enjoy the rest of your day. If it's going to take you 8 hours, then sit there for 8 hours, right? Yep. I think this idea of like writer's block and waiting for the muse to arrive is a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, for me it is too. So yeah.
Yeah, I learned very late that the best way out of writer's block is actually just writing. You can't just wait for that lightning strike. You have to just sit there and force your fingers to move. And then
you know what, I always believed in writer's block, right? And then I was in before the pandemic, I was in Nigeria with Bernardina Barista. We were both performing at the same festival, and I said to her, what do you do when you have writer's block? And she just won the Booker Prize like 2 months previously.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you do when you have writer's block, Bernardine? And she looked at me, she gave me the most scathing look you've ever imagined. And she looked at me, she just said, there's no such thing as writer's block. And I just went, okay. And that's that. And it just made such sense to me at the time. I was like, of course there's not. It's just anxiety or you procrastinating, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that too, because I read once that it's just like you have to get rid of your pride, because you're thinking, oh, I need to write something good. And it's like, no, you need to write, because you need to write a lot of bad stuff to get to the stuff that's good. Right. So if you're holding 100%. This stuff like everything I write should be brilliant, that's not how it works. You just need to write the chapter and then be like, this is terrible, and then go and rewrite the chapter. So you are writing, you're just not writing what you think is good enough yet. And it might not be, because you need to keep writing.
Yeah. Right. And if you can't get over yourself and get rid of the pride, don't be a writer. It's not for you.
Oh, absolutely. The internet will squash you immediately anyway. So there's nothing precious here. We've blown through that. No, we're very weathered by the time we get here.
what did you learn about yourself once you typed the end and you had finished writing the book, Salma?
That I can write a book far quicker than I ever thought I could. So stop messing around and just write more books. Basically, that's what I learned. Because again, I'd probably bought into the narrative of waiting for inspiration, and writing a book takes, a year. And you know what? Some books do 100%. Like for some people they do, for some people they take a really long time. But I wrote mine in a month, and I sat down and had a 5,000 word a day word limit. And I would put it on a calendar every day how many words I had written. And some days it was never below 5, but some days it was 6 or 7. A couple of days it was 10. And by the time I got to the end of the month, there was a draft there. Of course it needed editing, and of course it needed work. But it was a good draft, and it just made me look at it, and it just made me go, oh, what exactly have you been doing all these years when you were not writing that? And you could have written it, and you can write things a lot quicker. And we all have 100 stories in us on any given day. And if you're disciplined enough, and don't get me wrong, I look back on, and I did it with my second book as well, which isn't published yet, but I did it with my second book, 5,000 words a day for a month, got it done. And don't get me wrong, I look back on those months and feel nauseous, like I want to be sick by the pure volume of output that I was doing, and the amount of energy that was coming out of me every day to get that done. Right, I can't have conversations with anyone else. I'm not interacting with the world in that month. I'm not reading anything, and it does make me feel like I'm sick. But I did learn that actually we can get stories out of us quicker than I ever thought, and that I had the potential perhaps to write more stories than I thought was possible.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I would say in terms of what I learned, I really was, without spoiling the book, I really just made some super ambitious decisions in the book that I'm glad they didn't scare me. I'm glad I wasn't scared to make those decisions, particularly with where the story goes. I just did whatever I wanted. So I felt really confident doing whatever I wanted without feeling scared for what anyone would think, really. I was doing what served the story, and I was doing where my artistic heart was taking me with the work. So and then also just learning, I wrote this book during the pandemic. So I wrote 2 books during the pandemic. And so that just personally made me feel like I didn't know how I would react to a global pandemic. So I was glad to know that I could, and thankfully my family and I were healthy during that time. So I was able to work instead. And it was a really good distraction to be able to work and to look back and to have some books, sold and done and finished. But it's one of those things to where, I was sitting down writing every day. And sometimes even still, I'll look at it and be like, you read something from your book and be like, when did I write that? When did I do that? I'm so glad I did it. But going there, putting myself back there, when I actually did it, I'm like, how did I do that? But that's a good feeling, because it's like, at least it's done. But so with every book, I'm always learning to trust myself more, learning to take big risks more, and all that stuff. And so I just hope that keeps going.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I get into the rest of my questions, if any of our audience out there has some questions, you can put them in the Q&A box and I can get to those. So while we wait for a couple of questions from the audience, I will continue to ask. If someone just tore off all the identifying information on the covers of your book, and all we had was the inside, your name was nowhere, how would we know that we are reading a book by Leesa Cross-Smith? How would we know that we are reading a book by Salma El-Wardany?
Yeah, El-Wardany. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. So how would we know this book is by you?
For me, it would be because there's Kisses in the Kitchen and ABBA. It would also be because Vincent goes on and on about Lou's nose. I always write, I have a nose thing. So going on and on about a man's nose, and also just like constant mention of flowers. those and being in love with the Irish accents. And I feel like, dang, like if I was trying to hide myself, I do a terrible job. I talk about BTS in the book. Like I could never lie and act like that's not my baby. That's my baby. She looks just like me.
I love that. There's no hiding it. That's what.
No.
In terms for me, I think there's always going to be mention of cake somewhere in the book. There is
I love it.
always going to be cake.
Yeah.
And there's this might sound strange, but there's going to be an ache. There's going to be something that aches or makes you ache inside, hopefully, because I always say I have a wasted heart. And all I ever want to do is write something so beautiful that it makes you ache inside, whatever that feeling is. So there's kind of this level of sadness that exists in my work, I think. And that sadness for me comes from the reality and the complexities of womanhood, because I'm obsessed with female stories. So you take everything off the cover, you're going to find female stories every single time. And you're going to find the pain of womanhood at the heart of those stories. And yes, womanhood being this glorious, beautiful, wonderful thing, but also how painful it is to be a woman in a world that isn't built for you, and that is built to disregard you, and that is built to ignore you and not keep you safe. And just the eternal ache of that. It's not a great sell, by the way. It's going to make you hurt, and it's all about how shit it is to be a woman. But hopefully I do it beautifully. I try anyway. It's what I aim to do. And I think and hopefully as well, not holding back on the realities of womanhood, basically. I think that's what you will find at the core of all of my writing.
I love that.
Cake and pain, basically. They're there to even each other out, hopefully. So when you feel so fucking depressed about it, you can just eat some cake.
So we're getting to enjoy both of your books during summer, a very hot summer over here. What for you makes the perfect summer read? What are you looking for when you're looking for your own good summer read? Leesa?
You know, I feel like I don't have one thing. I was thinking about this earlier, but I was thinking about, a couple of years ago, I went to the beach and I took that big Hamilton book that, that I was reading after Hamilton came out. So this was years ago. So I feel like I go to the beach to read with this idea of reading something sort of light, but it's never really enough for me. So I always choose to read something a little heavier because I actually am having more time to dig into something. So I would read a fluffier book at a different time. So I feel like I'm sort of backwards with that. So like this summer, I've just been reading like exclusively like Murakami, which is like just heavier, almost like a winter reads, but I'm reading them in the summer. So I feel like I do it backwards, but I also feel like anything you read on the beach and during the summer is your summer read. So it just depends on, what your jam is really.
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, a summer read is about escapism, right? Yeah. Like you want to step out of your mundane reality, right? And your 9 to 5 and the laundry and the groceries and emptying the bins and all the things that we have to do every single day as responsible adults just to make life move forward. And I think a summer read for me is about escaping all of that and stepping into a world that you do not know. So it can be anything, just like Leesa said, right? It can be anything that is not your everyday reality that takes you. That could be fantasy literature. It could be erotic literature. It could be, a really heavy story of a world that you are not familiar with. So I think it can be anything, just something that takes you to a different world.
Nichole, I want to hear your answer.
Oh, for me, a good summer read, I don't know. I'm kind of the same. I read whatever year round, but I guess most often if I'm taking a summer vacation, that is not, on my couch. I do try to take a book that maybe I'm a little late to, that everyone was talking about, like last year, earlier in the year, and I just didn't want to have the hype covering my reading pleasure. So I'll find a book that like I liked it, but it was also getting talked about too much. So I didn't.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'll take that so that I can actually enjoy it in my brain solitude.
Yeah.
I love romance novels, so I'm always gonna have like a passel of romance novels to read during the summer. And that's when I also do most of my cozy mystery reading is during the summer. I know most people are like, those are like the fall and winter books, I guess, but
I like them in summer too, though. I'm the same.
Yeah, I like a nice whodunit. So it's either going to be a whodunit, a book that was hyped that I'm just kind of like letting quiet down a little bit, or a very good, juicy romance novel.
I think there's a difference between a summer read and a beach read as well for me. So like for me, being on the beach, I whenever I did a beach holiday, and like if you're living in England, you're not on the beach that often because we don't have hot weather. So it's like when you're traveling abroad, right? So whenever I used to go on beach holidays, I always wanted to take a pile of Mills and Boon's books. Do you have Mills and Boon's in America?
Or like we call them Harlequin romances. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And they are not great literature at all. And they are, although let's contend that because that's just being like, that's the academic elite. But they're all like named like the doctor's wife or the sultan's mistress, or do you know what I mean? Something, and it follows very same formula, and there's some sex scenes and they're quite sexy. They are perfect for me for a beach read because I love, like, when you're lying on the beach and you're in your bikini and the sun is playing on your skin, and the sun's a natural aphrodisiac anyway, and you feel so powerful in your body and you feel so sensual. I just want to lie there and read.
Yeah.
It's very easy. Like, it's like trash TV is the equivalent for literature. That's my beach read. Like, as much as I love like A Little Life, for example, I'm not reading it on a beach. I want to feel sexy on a beach. I don't want to contemplate the pain of this man's life on a beach,
I understand that.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about planning, outlining versus not, and having a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do in the beginning and the end, and maybe not the middle. But was there a character, or maybe more than one, that you had this idea of what they were going to do, and then the character was like, no, excuse me, this is what I want to do. I want to do something a little different. And so you have to like rework your plan for that character. Salma?
There were instances where I was writing and I kept it very loose. There were instances when I was writing where I thought, oh, that's where you want to go. Okay, cool. Let's go off in that direction. And the characters are very much alive and they have conversations in my head, and then I just write them all down. And I'm just the vessel which they can come out into the world. So I've never restricted that. I just think if it's taking you someplace, personally, I think follow it and change your plan accordingly, like hustle quick time.
Yeah, I feel like that happens with all my characters, really. They'll sort of start there and then they, and they just grow from there. So Vincent meets this really great group of friends over in Paris. She has a really close friend, a gentleman called Baptiste, and then a woman called Agathe, and they both really surprised me with what they were doing and what they decided to do. And then I'll have a character pop up that out of nowhere that I didn't even know was going to be a character, and she plays a pretty important role in the book and in Vincent's feelings about her marriage. So yeah, that's a really fun part, a really fun magical part of writing for me. When I love being surprised by what I'm doing. I tell the story to myself, and then when I'm surprising myself, it's like when you can kind of sneak up on yourself. I didn't know I was going to write that, or I didn't know I was going to feel that way. I hope that I always feel that magic. I actually cannot even I can't imagine writing a book and not feeling that magic. I think that's when I'd know it was over, I guess, because I'm so glad that I still always feel that way when I'm working on a book.
It's beautiful. And how did you both know, okay, I'm done with this story, let me put the end on this manuscript? And you were like, okay, I have to finish this story, or this story is done. Leesa?
I think that's another thing for me that takes on a little bit of magic, because I just, I don't know. I just tell the story to myself, and when it reminds me, I think so often of this. There's a scene in Alice in Wonderland whenever the Mad Hatter is talking to Alice, and he says, start at the beginning, and when you come to the end, stop. and it's like he's trying to tell her how to teach how to tell a story. And so I always think about that when I'm writing, because I don't really know. It's just now that's when I do really go on vibes. It's just a feeling I get, and especially no spoilers again, but especially when it comes to Half Blown Rose, like I knew it was going to end a certain way, and I knew that the story that I was writing was going to be over. It's also my story, so in my head I know what's happening and I know what's going to go on after I've said the end, but I knew that part of the story was going to be over for the reader. And then you also don't want to overstay your welcome. And I don't want to mess anything up. It's like it's perfect now for me. I really don't want to mess anything up. So yeah, and I usually will know the ending or close enough to the ending when I start writing the book. So that part of it, the endings are always some of the easiest things for me. It's all the stuff in between that sort of wears me out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I've always known what the ending would be, and it's just a matter of like how you can get there. It's a little bit like you've got a destination. How do you get there, right? And it's the journey bit. It's getting from A to B that's hard. But the ending, just I think it happens really naturally. And writing is such an intuitive thing as well, and you have to listen to your gut. And you've got like this living, breathing relationship with these people on the page, and it's a bit like the end of a sigh. I don't know. You just know when it's over. Like it just stops very naturally, and you think, yes, you are now all in the places that I want you to be in at the end. So now we can physically write the end.
I like that. I like the idea of, just, the story, but you also let a little bit of that magic, a little bit of the intuition kind of guide you to the book's natural end, so that it feels, I guess, authentic to your characters as well, and not just authentic to your craft and to your characters. So I appreciate that. I think we are out of time. I could ask one more question.
Feel free to ask one more question if you'd like to. Sorry, for some reason it took me 30 seconds longer than it should have to unmute and turn on my video, but please.
No, it was just the usual what's next.
Oh, why would I know that though? So
which is,
I would ask it if you did, Nichole.
That's a lot of pressure. It's like, I'm already talking about this one book and now you're asking me about something else, the future. But please, Leesa and Salma, tell us what's next. Are you working on anything, taking a break? What's going on?
Yeah, so I have a book called Goodbye Earl that's coming out next July. So that's coming out a year from now, and that's my 6th book. And I'm about to turn it in all the way done with it pretty soon. And then I guess I'm going to take a long break after that. So one more book, long break.
Nice. That's so impressive. Your 6th book. Like, congratulations. That's so beautiful. I wrote my 2nd one. I wrote it. I was very intentional that I wanted to write it before the first one came out, because I didn't want to write it with everyone's feedback and critique in my head. I just wanted to, and so that's, I'm currently kind of editing that. It's called After. I can't say anything else about it, but I'm very excited about it. I'm working on a few projects in relation to this one. Annoyingly and pretentiously can't say anything about it, but watch this space. It's all very exciting. There are no breaks on the horizon, but I haven't written 6 books. But when I get to number 6, I will take a long break, a la Leesa style.
Love it. Thank you both.
Yes, thanks all of you for this incredible conversation this evening. We're looking forward to, on all fronts, to a well-deserved break for Leesa after this next book, to more from you, Salma, and hopefully we can have all 3 of you in the store in the not too distant future to do this again in person. But thank you for being here, and thanks to our viewers for joining us. There are links to purchase books from tonight's authors in the chat, and there's also links directly below me in the description if you're watching us all on YouTube. Leesa Cross-Smith, Salma El-Wardany, Nichole Perkins, thank you so much for joining us at Home with Literati this evening. Hope you stay well, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And to all of our viewers, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nichole. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, all.